The turquoise Caribbean waters churned violently as Roderick Voss's arms flailed against the merciless current. His desperate gasps for air punctuated the otherwise serene morning. "Help!" His voice cracked, salt water filling his mouth. "Sable! Help me!" 20 yards away, his new bride Sable Kincaid-Voss stood motionless in waist-deep water, her designer sunglasses reflecting the tropical sun. She didn't scream, she didn't dive toward him. She simply watched. Was it shock that froze her in place, or something far more calculated? Have you ever wondered what goes through someone's mind when they witness their spouse in mortal danger? What would you do if the person who once betrayed you was now fighting for their life before your eyes? The guide raced through the water, but the distance was too great. By the time he reached Roderick, Baltimore's celebrated forensic accountant had already disappeared beneath the surface, leaving only ripples where a life had just been. 3 days into their honeymoon, the newlyweds' fairy tale ended in tragedy. But this was no ordinary drowning accident. When investigators examined Sable's reaction, or lack thereof, questions emerged that would shock Baltimore society to its core. Why didn't she attempt to help? Why did she increase his life insurance policy just weeks before their wedding? And what about those text messages to her sister? Welcome back to Altar of Secrets, where wedding bells sometimes toll for tragedy. I'm thrilled to have both our loyal viewers and newcomers joining us today. For those discovering us for the first time, our channel transforms real-life events into compelling narratives that expose the warning signs many miss until it's too late. We don't just cover crimes, we examine the human decisions that created a path to disaster. Here at Altar of Secrets, we believe every story holds lessons that might save relationships or even lives. The case we're covering today will challenge everything you think you know about marriage, trust, and the thin line between inaction and intent. If you're new to our community, this is your moment to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Drop a like if you're already forming theories about Sable's true intentions, and let us know in the comments which country you're watching from. Our global audience brings fascinating perspectives to each case. Now, let's return to Baltimore, where a wealthy couple's honeymoon paradise became the setting for a mystery that continues to haunt Maryland's elite social circles to this day. Baltimore's social pages couldn't get enough of them. Roderick Voss and Sable Kincaid represented everything the city's elite aspired to be: successful, attractive, and seemingly destined for greatness. Roderick, at 34, had built his reputation as the go-to forensic accountant for Baltimore's wealthiest. His keen eye for financial deception had uncovered millions in corporate fraud. The Baltimore Business Journal once called him the human lie detector of balance sheets. His clients included politicians, CEOs, and old money families who trusted him with their most sensitive financial secrets. Rod could spot a hidden transaction from a mile away, said former colleague James Whitmore. Nothing escaped his attention when it came to money. Sable Kincaid, 31, moved in equally impressive circles. As a luxury travel consultant catering to high-net-worth clients, she crafted exclusive getaways to destinations most people only see in magazines. Her company, Kincaid Escapes, specialized in private islands, remote villas, and experiences so exclusive they required non-disclosure agreements. Sable knew how to make the impossible happen, recalled one client. She once arranged a private dinner inside a museum that doesn't offer private events. That was her magic. Their paths crossed at a charity gala 3 years before their wedding. Witnesses described their first meeting as electric. Within 6 months, they purchased a waterfront home in Baltimore's Harbor East neighborhood. Their Instagram accounts showcased yacht parties, weekend trips to New York, and intimate dinners at restaurants with month-long waiting lists. They complemented each other perfectly, said Marianne Holden, a frequent guest at their home. Rod's analytical mind balanced Sable's creative vision. They seemed unstoppable together. Local magazines featured their home renovation, their charity work, and their enviable lifestyle. When they announced their engagement, it made the front page of the Baltimore Sun's lifestyle section. The wedding of the year, the papers called it. But what happens when the camera flashes stop? When the carefully curated social media posts don't capture what's happening behind closed doors? Have you ever wondered how many perfect couples are actually living completely different realities in private? Share your thoughts in the comments below. As Roderick and Sable planned their dream wedding, neither could have predicted how their story would end, with one dead and the other standing trial. 4 months before their wedding date, Sable's world collapsed with a single text message, not meant for her eyes. She had borrowed Roderick's phone to call her assistant while hers charged. That's when the notification appeared. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Same hotel?" The sender, Vanessa Caldwell, wife of one of Roderick's most prominent clients. Sable scrolled through months of messages, each more intimate than the last. Photos, hotel receipts, plans made while Sable was out of town on business. The affair had been ongoing for nearly a year. "I felt like I couldn't breathe," Sable later told her sister Tamsin during a phone call police would eventually recover. "Everything we built was based on lies." That evening, she confronted Roderick with the evidence. He didn't deny it. "It meant nothing," he insisted, according to Sable's journal entries. "Vanessa was just a distraction. You're always traveling for work. What did you expect?" Sable packed a bag and spent 3 nights at her sister Tamsin's apartment. The wedding invitations had already been mailed, deposits paid, announcements made. "You can't just walk away," Tamsin advised during a conversation recorded on Sable's laptop. "Think about what you're giving up. His money, your reputation, everything you've worked for." Jory Matthews, Sable's best friend since college, offered similar counsel over wine at Tamsin's kitchen table. "Men cheat. Rich men cheat more," Jory said, swirling her glass. "But rich men also provide security. You could divorce him later and take half, or you could leave now with nothing." The recording captured Sable's response. "I don't know if I can look at him every day knowing what he did." "Then don't think of him as your husband," Tamsin suggested. "Think of him as an investment." 3 days later, Sable returned home. Roderick promised therapy, transparency, a fresh start. She nodded and accepted his apology with a kiss on his cheek. But something had changed in her eyes. "I knew she hadn't really forgiven him," Jory later testified, "but I never thought she'd—" The rest of her statement was cut off by her attorney. In her private journal found during the investigation, Sable wrote, "I smile at him while planning my exit. Every day I stay is another deposit in my future freedom fund. The longer I wait, the more I'll walk away with." What would you do if you discovered your partner's betrayal weeks before your wedding? Would you cancel everything or move forward with hidden motives? The choices we make in these moments reveal who we truly are. For Sable and Roderick, the decision to proceed with their wedding set in motion a chain of events that would end in tragedy. The Voss-Kincaid wedding transformed Baltimore's historic Belvedere Hotel into a wonderland of white orchids and crystal chandeliers. 300 guests arrived in luxury vehicles, stepping onto a custom white carpet that led to the grand ballroom. "It was like walking into a dream," recalled attendee Catherine Winters. Everything gleamed. The silverware, the ice sculptures, even the dance floor was polished to mirror-like perfection. Sable appeared at the top of the marble staircase in a custom Vera Wang gown, its 15-foot train requiring 2 assistants to manage. Guests gasped as she descended toward Roderick, who waited in a Tom Ford tuxedo, his expression a mixture of pride and possession. "She looked radiant," said wedding planner Diane Mercer, "but there was something in her eyes I couldn't place. Most brides look excited, nervous, emotional. Sable looked determined." The ceremony proceeded flawlessly. Vows were exchanged, rings placed on fingers, champagne poured into 300 crystal flutes simultaneously by a choreographed waitstaff. What guests couldn't see was the conversation that had occurred that morning in the bridal suite. "Just get through today," Tamsin had whispered while adjusting Sable's veil. "Think of it as a performance." "The best revenge is success," Jory added, handing Sable her bouquet. "And nothing says success like being Mrs. Roderick Voss." During the reception, Sable danced, laughed, and played the role of blissful bride to perfection. Only once did her mask slip, when she caught Roderick whispering to Vanessa Caldwell near the bar. For just a moment, her smile froze before she composed herself and continued greeting guests. "I remember thinking it was odd that they'd invite Vanessa and her husband," one guest later told investigators. "Everyone in their circle knew about the affair." As the night ended, The newlyweds departed in a vintage Rolls-Royce, waving to cheering guests. Their destination, a private airport, where Roderick's chartered jet waited to take them to paradise. If you're enjoying this story, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe. We're just getting to the part where everything changes, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The seaplane descended toward a speck of green surrounded by rings of white sand and azure water. This was Petite Saint Vincent in the Grenadines, a private island resort where villas start at $1,500 per night and privacy is the ultimate luxury. I selected this location specifically for its exclusivity, Sable later explained to detectives. Only 22 villas on the entire island. No phones, no TVs, no internet in the rooms. Complete isolation. Their beachfront villa opened directly onto powdery white sand. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased endless ocean views. A private plunge pool overlooked the Caribbean Sea. Staff delivered meals and drinks via discreet service boxes, allowing guests to maintain total seclusion if desired. The first 2 days were actually pleasant, Sable admitted during questioning. We swam, we drank champagne, we pretended everything was normal. Photos recovered from Sable's camera showed smiling selfies against stunning backdrops. Roderick kissing her cheek at sunset, the couple toasting with tropical drinks, breakfast on their private terrace. But text messages sent to Tamsin told a different story. Playing the role is exhausting. He keeps trying to touch me, and I have to force myself not to recoil. On their third morning, a note arrived with breakfast inviting guests to join a guided snorkeling excursion to the nearby coral reef, famous for its vibrant marine life and crystal-clear visibility. Roderick was excited about it, said Miguel Diaz, the resort's activities director. He mentioned he was a strong swimmer and wanted to see the drop-off where the reef meets the deep water. Sable initially declined, claiming she wanted a spa day instead. But according to her statement, Roderick insisted they do activities together. It's our honeymoon, he reportedly said. We should experience everything as a couple. Security footage from the resort dock showed the newlyweds boarding the small excursion boat at 9:42 a.m. Sable wore a black one-piece swimsuit with a wide-brimmed hat. Roderick sported bright blue swim trunks and carried premium snorkeling gear he'd purchased specifically for the trip. The boat captain, Emile Baptiste, remembered giving a safety briefing that included warnings about currents near the outer reef. I specifically told everyone to stay with their buddy and not to swim beyond the marked buoys, Baptiste testified. The gentleman, Mr. Voss, he laughed and said something about being on the swim team in college. No one could have predicted that within 2 hours, one of them would return to shore alone. The boat anchored near the reef at 10:15 a.m. 6 guests plus the guide slipped into water so clear it seemed like glass. Visibility extended nearly 100 feet in every direction, revealing coral formations in shapes that resembled underwater castles. The conditions were perfect that morning, Guide Antoine Moreau later testified. Gentle current, excellent visibility, minimal wind. GoPro footage from another guest captured Roderick adjusting his mask at the surface. "This is incredible," he called to Sable, who floated nearby. "Come look at these fish." The group followed Antoine along the reef's edge, observing parrotfish, angelfish, and sea turtles gliding through coral canyons. Antoine pointed out interesting formations and marine life, keeping the group together. Except for Roderick. He kept swimming ahead, Antoine recalled. I had to call him back several times. He wanted to explore the deeper sections where the reef drops off. At 10:47 a.m., Antoine gathered everyone for a rest at the surface. He counted heads, only 5 guests. Roderick had disappeared. "Where's your husband?" Antoine asked Sable. She pointed toward the outer edge of the reef. "He went that way." Antoine immediately spotted Roderick about 50 yards away, beyond the safety buoys, where the reef abruptly dropped from 30 feet to several hundred. The current there was notorious among local guides, deceptively gentle at the surface, but powerful just below. "I told everyone to stay put and began swimming toward him," Antoine said. "That's when I saw he was in trouble." Roderick's arms thrashed against the water. His snorkel had dislodged. The current was pulling him away from the reef toward open ocean. "Help!" His voice carried across the water. "I can't swim against it!" Antoine raced toward him, but the distance was significant. The other guests watched in horror, except Sable, who remained oddly still. "Mrs. Voss didn't react at all," said Jennifer Lawson, another guest. "Everyone else was shouting and pointing, but she just floated there watching. I remember thinking it was strange." By the time Antoine reached the spot where Roderick had been, there was nothing. The guide dove repeatedly, searching the blue depths, but the current had already carried Roderick away. The Coast Guard arrived 30 minutes later. Search teams combed the area for hours. Roderick's body was recovered the following morning, nearly a mile from where he disappeared. The medical examiner confirmed drowning as the cause of death. Toxicology showed no alcohol or drugs in his system. By all accounts, it was a tragic accident, except for one detail that investigators couldn't ignore. Why didn't his wife call for help? Detective Carlos Mendez would later ask. Why didn't she swim toward him, or at least show distress? Every witness statement describes her as completely calm throughout the entire incident. When questioned, Sable claimed shock had paralyzed her. "I couldn't process what was happening," she stated. "By the time I realized he was actually drowning, the guide was already swimming to help. But the timeline didn't add up. Roderick had called for help repeatedly over nearly 2 minutes before disappearing. Plenty of time for any normal person to react. Unless, of course, they didn't want to." The investigation centered on those critical 2 minutes when Roderick fought for his life. Every witness was interviewed multiple times, their statements cross-referenced and analyzed. "Mrs. Voss remained completely still in the water," confirmed Miguel Santos, another snorkeler. "While everyone shouted and pointed, she just watched. Her face showed no emotion, not fear, not panic, nothing." Antoine, the guide, provided the most damning testimony. "I glanced back as I swam toward Mr. Voss. His wife hadn't moved an inch. She wasn't calling out, wasn't swimming toward him, wasn't even trying to alert me. She just observed." Psychologists consulted by the prosecution suggested two possibilities: severe shock causing a freeze response, or a calculated decision to allow events to unfold. "The freeze response typically lasts seconds, not minutes," explained Dr. Rachel Winters, a trauma specialist. "And it usually includes visible signs of distress, wide eyes, rigid posture, hyperventilation." Witnesses described Mrs. Voss as appearing almost relaxed. When investigators questioned Sable about her inaction, her responses raised more questions than answers. "I was in shock," she repeated. "I couldn't move. I couldn't think." Yet resort staff noted that when she returned to shore, Sable calmly asked for a towel, ordered a water with lemon, and made a phone call before authorities even arrived. The resort manager, Paulo Reyes, recalled, "Most people who've witnessed a drowning are hysterical, inconsolable. Mrs. Voss was composed. She asked practical questions about contacting the American embassy and arranging for her husband's remains to be transported home." Perhaps most telling was the call Sable made from the resort's office phone. Not to family or friends, but to Roderick's life insurance company. She inquired about the claim process while search teams were still looking for him, testified the insurance representative. She specifically asked how long it would take to receive the payout. That policy, $5 million with double indemnity for accidental death, had been increased just 6 weeks before the wedding. The beneficiary? Sable Kincaid-Voss, sole and exclusive. In her defense, Sable's attorneys argued that grief manifests differently in everyone. "Some people become practical in crisis," her lawyer stated. Mrs. Voss was processing trauma by focusing on logistics, but prosecutors painted a different picture. A woman who, upon discovering her husband's infidelity, calculated that his death would be more profitable than divorce. She didn't need to push him into the water, the prosecutor argued. She simply needed to do nothing when he got into trouble. And doing nothing is exactly what every witness saw. If you're finding this story compelling, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe. We're about to explore how this case became one of the most controversial trials in recent memory. What do you think? Was Sable's inaction a crime? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Roderick's body arrived in Baltimore 5 days after his death. While most widows would be planning a funeral, Sable was meeting with financial advisors. She accessed his accounts before his body was even cold, said Detective Leah Morgan, lead investigator on the case. She transferred ownership of their properties, contacted his investment manager, and changed the passwords on his email accounts. The investigation shifted into high gear when Roderick's parents filed a complaint, suspicious of their daughter-in-law's behavior. They described her as oddly composed at the memorial service, where she wore designer black sunglasses and spent most of the reception texting. A judge granted warrants for Sable's electronic devices. What investigators found painted a disturbing timeline. 3 days after discovering Roderick's affair, Sable had researched countries with no extradition to U.S. and how to collect life insurance abroad. She'd also searched, can you be charged for not saving someone, and legal duty to rescue drowning person. Her text messages with Tamsin and Jory revealed a calculated plan. Sable, I can't divorce him now. Everyone would know about the affair. I'd look like a fool. Tamsin, so what's your plan? I'm thinking long-term, marriage, then freedom. With benefits, substantial ones. Most damning was an exchange 2 weeks before the honeymoon. Tamsin, are you sure about this trip? He wants to go snorkeling every day. He's not a strong swimmer despite what he thinks. Be careful what you put in writing. I'm not planning anything, but accidents happen, especially to overconfident men. When confronted with these messages, Sable claimed they were jokes, dark humor between friends, frustrated by Roderick's betrayal. The financial trail told another story. Sable had opened an offshore account in the Cayman Islands 1 month before the wedding. She'd also taken out additional insurance on Roderick without his knowledge, using paperwork he'd signed without reading. This wasn't a crime of passion, Detective Morgan concluded. This was methodical. She saw an opportunity in that water and chose not to act. The district attorney charged Sable with second-degree murder, arguing that her deliberate inaction, combined with financial motive and premeditation, constituted a criminal act. Baltimore society split into factions, those who believed Sable was a calculating killer, and those who saw her as a wronged woman who froze in a moment of crisis. The trial would become one of the most watched legal proceedings in Maryland history. The Baltimore County Courthouse steps became a media battleground as Sable's trial began. News vans lined the street. Protesters held signs reading "Justice for Roderick" and "Inaction is murder." Counter-protesters argued she's not guilty of his poor choices. Inside, the prosecution opened with a powerful statement. Roderick Voss didn't just drown in the Caribbean. He drowned while the one person who should have cared most watched and did nothing. This wasn't an accident, it was an execution by omission. The defense countered with psychology. Mrs. Voss experienced acute stress response, commonly known as freezing. She physically couldn't move as her brain shut down in trauma. Charging her for an involuntary psychological response sets a dangerous precedent. Day by day, the evidence mounted. Financial records, text messages, search histories, witness testimonies from the snorkeling trip. Tamsin and Jory became key witnesses, their loyalty tested under oath. Did you discuss ways your sister could benefit from her husband's death? The prosecutor asked Tamsin. We were just venting, Tamsin insisted. Everyone says things they don't mean when they're angry. When pressed about the text regarding Roderick not being a strong swimmer, Tamsin broke down. It was just talk. We never thought anything would actually happen. Jory proved more damaging to Sable's defense. Under cross-examination, she admitted, Sable said if something happened to Roderick during the honeymoon, she'd be set for life. I thought she was joking, but she had this look in her eyes. The courtroom fell silent as prosecutors played enhanced GoPro footage from another snorkeler. The video clearly showed Sable watching Roderick struggle, her expression blank behind designer sunglasses. Expert witnesses battled over psychology. The prosecution's expert testified, a freeze response typically lasts seconds, not minutes, and it doesn't explain her calm behavior immediately afterward. The defense's psychologist countered, trauma responses aren't universal. Some people appear calm while internally shutting down. The case captivated national attention. Morning shows debated the duty to rescue. Legal podcasts analyzed Maryland's laws on criminal inaction. Social media exploded with armchair detectives offering theories. This case touches something primal, noted legal analyst Sophia Washington. We all wonder, would someone we love let us drown? And could they get away with it? As the trial entered its third week, the prosecution revealed their final piece of evidence, a voice memo Sable recorded the night before the snorkeling trip. "Tomorrow's the day," her voice said calmly. "One way or another, I'll be free." The defense fought to exclude it, claiming it referred to a planned conversation about separation. The judge allowed it. As deliberations began, the nation held its breath. The verdict would set precedent for cases of criminal inaction for decades to come. What's your verdict? Would you convict Sable? Let us know in the comments below. After 4 days of deliberation, the jury returned to a packed courtroom. News helicopters hovered above the courthouse. Social media platforms crashed as millions awaited the verdict. In the case of Maryland versus Sable Kincaid-Voss, on the charge of second-degree murder, we find the defendant not guilty. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Roderick's mother collapsed into her husband's arms. The jury foreman later explained, "We couldn't prove beyond reasonable doubt that her inaction was intentional rather than psychological. The law requires certainty we simply didn't have." Legal experts called it a landmark decision. "This case exposed a gap in our legal system," explained Professor James Harrington of Georgetown Law. "We have no clear standard for when inaction becomes criminal." Outside the courthouse, Sable faced a wall of cameras with her attorney. She offered no smile, no tears, just a prepared statement. "I lost my husband in a tragic accident. Now I've lost 2 years of my life to false accusations. I ask for privacy as I rebuild." She walked away $10 million richer from combined insurance policies and Roderick's estate. Baltimore society ostracized her completely. Former friends crossed streets to avoid her. Restaurants mysteriously had no tables available. Her luxury travel business collapsed as clients disappeared. 6 months after the verdict, Sable sold all properties in Maryland and relocated to Portugal, a country with limited extradition agreements with the United States. Her Instagram, once filled with glamorous couple photos, now showcases solo travels and sunset cocktails. She never mentions Roderick or the trial. Roderick's parents established a foundation in their son's name, providing swimming lessons to underprivileged children and advocating for stronger duty-to-rescue laws. The case remains a staple in law schools nationwide, challenging students to debate the question, when does standing by become a crime? Some questions have no satisfying answers, only the cold comfort of justice imperfectly served. The Roderick and Sable case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about marriage, morality, and the thin line between justice and revenge. What can we learn from this tragedy? First, betrayal creates wounds that sometimes never heal. Roderick's affair shattered trust that no apology could restore. When relationships break, genuine forgiveness requires time and work, or a clean break. False reconciliation only deepens the damage. Second, our legal system struggles with moral gray areas. The law clearly defines active crimes, hitting, shooting, poisoning, but passive actions, watching, waiting, allowing tragedy to unfold, exist in a murky territory where intent becomes nearly impossible to prove. Third, we must recognize warning signs in our relationships. Roderick ignored Sable's changed behavior after discovering his affair. He mistook her quiet compliance for forgiveness, never questioning why she suddenly agreed to proceed with the wedding. Perhaps most importantly, this case reminds us that sometimes the most dangerous response to betrayal isn't rage, it's cold calculation. The opposite of love isn't hate, noted psychologist Dr. Hannah Klein, who studied the case. It's indifference. When someone who once loved you becomes completely detached, that's when truly dangerous decisions become possible. We'll never know with absolute certainty what went through Sable's mind as she watched Roderick struggle in those waters. The jury couldn't determine it. The law couldn't define it. What would you have done in Sable's position? What would you do if someone you loved was drowning, physically or metaphorically, before your eyes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. On Altar of Secrets, we believe understanding these dark moments helps us recognize warning signs in our own lives. Until next time, remember, the most dangerous waters aren't those that surround exotic islands, but the silent depths of resentment where forgiveness is performed rather than felt. In those depths, even the strongest swimmers can drown. Stay safe, stay aware, and thank you for joining us today. See you on another story from the Altar of Secrets. Bye for now.